Okay, we'll get started. Thank you everyone for joining us. Welcome to Cando's Procurement Showcase. Today we'll be spending about 2 hours together learning the ins and outs of procurement in the federal government. I've just got a little bit of information here to read out to you. So my name is Paul Macedo, Communications Director with Cando, the Council for the Advancement of Native Development Officers. Today, we're going to spend a bit of time discussing opportunities in procurement with the federal government, which accounts for about $200 billion a year in spend. We'll get into the details on what the 5% set aside as a floor for Indigenous businesses. That represents over $1 billion annually. So it's a significant opportunity for Indigenous communities and Indigenous businesses that position themselves to take advantage of that opportunity. Cando is not prescribing that all businesses do this, but we certainly want to provide information so that Indigenous businesses, Indigenous entrepreneurs, Indigenous communities can better determine for themselves if this is an opportunity worth pursuing. So I'm situated at Cando's main office in Edmonton on Treaty 6. Cando also has staff situated across Canada. Today, the principal folks presenting today is John Johnstone, Associate Director of Procurement with Cando, and Daniel Sandos, who's with Procurement Assistance Canada based in Victoria. I'll just move into the slideshow and just tell you a little bit about Cando. So Cando is a national Indigenous organization with it's membership based. Our members are economic development officers working for Indigenous communities. Their role and their mandate is to create impact in Indigenous community economic development. What we do as an organization is we provide training and networking opportunities, as well as we help develop and deliver EDO certification with 9 accredited institutions across Canada. We have a national conference that's hosted every year. Last year was located in Membertou, Nova Scotia. In 2024, the event will be moved to the fall, likely October. Location to be determined, but it will be our 30th conference. So it's a momentous event for us. So the other things that we do is we have youth development and youth initiatives, including scholarships, a national youth panel, and the Economic Development Youth Summit that's hosted every August. So we're mandated and we're charged and responsible to provide tools and resources so that EDOs can do their work more effectively. A couple of those things that we do for EDOs is involving procurement. Our goal is to provide EDOs with procurement orientation and mentorship so that they in turn can assist Indigenous businesses in their communities who are interested in moving into this space and exploring the opportunities that procurement can have for either diversifying their client base, expanding their markets, or increasing their revenues. So with some additional details on what Cando does, and by all means, you can look for this at Cando's website, edo.ca. So we've got 450 members across Canada. We provide EDO training and certification. And as I mentioned, we provide EDO tools and opportunities to develop their skill set and to network through our various events. So speaking of events, for example, in Alberta, we have the Alberta Links to Learning, which is a 3-day training symposium for Alberta-based EDOs and land managers. That will be November 27 to 29 at Sutina, just outside of Calgary. In December 11 to 13, we're going to host BC Links to Learning, a 3-day symposium in Vancouver for British Columbia-based EDOs and lands managers. BC Links to Learning is one of our larger events with about 300 participants. Both of those events will also host several procurement sessions, again, to provide that orientation and information to EDOs. And as I mentioned, we have the annual conference. Part of that conference is the Economic Developer of the Year Awards. It's a way to showcase economic developers, from individuals to community, and use their examples of success to inspire others to achieve that same level of success. So that's my portion. John Johnstone, I think you're up.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. What we're going to do at this point is just to kind of keep the correct, hopefully the correct flow, is we're going to ask Anne Marie Williams from Indigenous Services Canada to come on screen, please, and to hopefully share your presentation. And we'd love to hear a bit about some of the work that ISC is doing and some of the tools and resources that are available around procurement. And after Anne-Marie has an opportunity to go into those details, we will have the team from Procurement Assistance Canada talk a bit about some of the things that are happening on their side. And then we will actually circle back, and myself and Paul will talk about the numerous things that Cando has been developing over the last couple of years. And then we'll close everything off with hopefully a bit of time for questions. So Anne-Marie, just a quick mic check. Let me know that you're able to hear me, and we can hear you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, certainly can. Thank you for joining us. And let me know, you should have co-host rights, so there should be an opportunity for you to share your screen or your presentation directly if you'd like.
A minute. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet. There we go.
Looks like it's coming. Yep.
Success. Okay, awesome. Thank you.
So we can see it in the not in the full presentation view, but in the but I mean that can even work. But if you'd like to go to full presentation view, that would remove the slide sorter on the side. Up to you.
How do I do that? Display.
Just go to View Slideshow.
Does that work?
Not yet.
Please enter password.
I'm sorry, I'm so used to
Just at the top of the screen, you see slideshow along that at the top. Just click on slideshow and then start from the beginning.
Yeah.
I actually don't see slideshow at the top of the screen.
It's at the top of your PowerPoint screen, not the Zoom screen.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, right up there. No, go down one. The next row.
One line
One line down.
It's been blocked. I'm so sorry.
That's
Uh,
okay.
It's not in the orange row, it's a one below it, just below.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go to
Just
slideshow.
keep going
Keep
over
going
it,
to the
keep going
right.
over it.
Here,
Go to the right a little. No, a little bit to the right.
what's happening? Okay, let me minimize for a second. Okay. No, I can't see it.
Okay.
This one?
Feel free to just
Just
start.
use that one.
Yeah, just start with this,
Okay.
and we can also share. We can share the deck out afterwards for people if they're not able to read it as well.
I'm so sorry. I had
And
it's like
you don't see the slideshow. It's like file, home, insert, draw, design, transition, animation, slideshow.
how's that?
Yes.
There you go.
Okay.
There you
Awesome.
go.
Okay, so once again, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Anne-Marie Williams, and I am a policy program officer here at Indigenous Services Canada. And before we begin, I'd just like to say that I'm coming to you from the traditional unceded territory of the Anishinaabe peoples of Ontario. So thank you for having me here today. And I just want to mention that the person who was originally supposed to be presenting today is not feeling well, Tim Diamond. And so I'm just taking his place last minute. And I hope I can do this presentation well. So bear with me. So we're talking about federal procurement and with Indigenous businesses. So we'll do an overview of the program, which is the procurement strategy for Indigenous business. We'll talk about some contracting strategies that we have here in the government. We'll go in a little bit into the Indigenous Business Directory. We'll talk about Indigenous Participation Plan and the 5% transformative Indigenous procurement strategy as well. So outreach, what we do here at Indigenous Services Canada, we are mandated to do outreach for the program, the PSIB program, which is the Procurement Strategy for Indigenous Business. We like to use acronyms, so we always use PSIB for that program. So we perform outreach and engagement activities for federal contracting community and Indigenous businesses on Indigenous considerations in procurement. We're also working on reestablishing the Indigenous Procurement Coordinators Network. What that is, it's a network of individuals across federal organizations who can advocate within their departments for including contracting strategies to stimulate Indigenous involvement. The coordinators, they act as an initial point of contact for in order to connect businesses with potential opportunities. Often the coordinators are involved in procurement planning. They're also involved in reporting on contracts with Indigenous businesses for their organization. This positions them well to identify opportunities within their organizations where contracts can include Indigenous considerations. To help the government better understand existing capacity, outreach events may also take place, often in collaboration with Procurement Assistance Canada. We also do manage registrations for the Indigenous Business Directory. We help business to register their business and update their information as needed. We also provide advice and guidance on the procurement strategy for Indigenous business. We are the point of contact for the guidance and the implementation of PSIB. And lastly, we do planning and reporting. We're responsible for planning and reporting of the minimum 5% procurement target. Federal organizations will be reporting back to us on the progress that they're making, and we will be publicly publishing the results. The departments are contracting with Indigenous businesses in a number of ways. Some of those ways are through modern treaties. Contracts are awarded to beneficiaries in modern treaty areas with procurement obligations. There is exclusive bidding or limited bidding or set-asides, either one. You can use interchangeably those phrases. Contract opportunities are often only open to Indigenous businesses, such as the PSIB program and as part of a modern treaty obligations. We can also Part of the strategy would be also unbundling, and that means the requirements for the contract are unbundled to permit smaller, more specialized firms to bid. We also have open contracts. That means open tender contracts are awarded to winning Indigenous firms. However, in these instances, only contracts to businesses registered in the IBD or who's the beneficiary of the modern treaty are counted in the federal reporting statistics. Indigenous Participation Plan is another one, and this includes different forms of participation such as subcontracting, employment, training, and other indirect forms of participation such as grants, scholarships, and or bursaries. We also have sole sourcing. This can happen when a contract has a value of less than 100,000 for construction-specific contracts, or 40,000 for services, or less than 25,000 for goods. Other sole sourcing conditions include when there is a pressing emergency, or when it is not in the public interest to solicit bids, or when only one person or business is capable of doing the work. So determining the Indigenous capacity strategy, there's a couple of strategies that we use. The strategies are used to increase the participation of Indigenous businesses in federal procurement. The strategy applied will depend on the procurement, where the procurement is taking place, who the recipient of the good or service is, and the capacity and interest of Indigenous businesses to participate. First, determination. A procurement officer will determine whether modern treaty procurement obligations apply. If that happens, modern treaty trumps the PSIP program. There are currently 25 modern treaties in effect, and 22 of them contain procurement obligations. While procurement obligations will vary from each modern treaty, no two modern treaties are the same, so each modern treaty has to be read and understood individually. But some of the obligations may include unbundling, limited bidding, right of first refusal, notification to right holders, and using business lists or socioeconomic evaluation criteria. If a modern treaty does apply, the procurement officer will look to other mechanisms such as limited bidding under the procurement strategy for Indigenous business. Under PSIP, federal departments and agencies will limit bidding exclusively to eligible Indigenous businesses. This means that only Indigenous businesses can be considered for the award. Outside of modern treaties, when contracts are destined for an area, a community, or a group in which Indigenous people make up at least 51% of the population, and where the Indigenous population will be the recipient of the good, the service, or the construction, it is mandatory for departments to consider limited bidding or set-asides exclusively among eligible Indigenous businesses. That is, those that do or can meet the requirements of the federal Indigenous business, those who can meet the requirements, and those who are on this or listed on the IBD, which is the Indigenous Business Directory, or on a modern treaty list. There's also voluntary bidding. This is strongly encouraged when mandatory limited bidding factors are not present, but there is known Indigenous business capacity in the Indigenous Business Directory. And lastly, we have conditional limited bidding. This may be used when the existing capacity is unknown. That means that procurement is open to Indigenous and non-Indigenous businesses. However, if two or more Indigenous businesses submit a bid, then the procurement is limited under PSIP, which means only the Indigenous businesses will be considered. When limiting bidding under PSIP, being listed in the Indigenous Business Directory or on a modern treaty list is required if you'd like to be considered for the award. Being listed on either confirms that your business meets the eligibility requirement for PSIP. The IBD is managed by the Government of Canada. To be listed, business must fall within one of the following business structures. It could be a sole proprietorship, a limited company, a cooperative, a partnership, or not-for-profit organization in which Indigenous businesses own and control at least 51% of the business. Joint ventures and partnership in which Indigenous businesses own and control at least 51% of the joint venture or the partnership is also considered. Modern treaty business lists, however, are managed by the modern treaty right holders, not Canada, and eligibility requirements may differ from the IBD. So when you're considering considerations for subcontracting, any contract awarded under PSIP that includes subcontracting, 33% of the total contract value must be completed by the prime and subcontractors listed on the IBD. A maximum of 67% can be completed by the business, which is not in the IBD. So in the first example on the left, we see that the IBD business only delivers 19% of the contract value. This does not meet the PCP eligibility criteria because it is less than the 33% that is mandated. In the next example, 33% of the contract value is delivered by the business on the IBD. So this meets the eligibility criteria for PCP because the minimum requirement is 33%, has been met. In this example, note that there are 2 IBD businesses delivering on the contract. So there is no limit to the number of IBD businesses that can be involved. IBD businesses meaning Indigenous businesses in this case. In these type of contract where the bidding is limited under PSIP, reviews to determine whether the 33% requirement has been met may take place following an award of the contract. This review is required for contracts valued at $2 million or higher, but such post-award review can also occur on a random basis or when the requisitioning department or contracting authority has expressed a need to do so. So what is the Indigenous Business Directory, the IBD? The IBD assists and supports Indigenous businesses in the pursuit of business opportunities, including federal procurement. This directory is available at all levels of government and private sector. It's open to the public. It is a primary source for the Government of Canada to determine whether there is an Indigenous business capacity to fulfill a federal contract. A profile on the directory also confirms eligibility of businesses for contracts that are limited to competition among Indigenous businesses under the PSIP program. It is also a tool that can be used to search for opportunities for partnerships, joint ventures, subcontracting opportunities, and receive information about upcoming networking opportunities and other related federal Indigenous procurement news. So in order to be registered in the IBD, businesses will undergo an initial review, which verifies that a business has at least 51% Indigenous ownership and control. The initial review will happen at the application stage, but it may also take place from time to time to ensure that the businesses continue to meet the requirements of the IBD. In order to ensure contracts and the associated benefits are being delivered to Indigenous people, a review can take place on a random basis. For example, whether a contract over $2 million is limited to businesses on the IBD under PSIP, whenever a contract is limited under PSIP, the business to be considered for the contract will be flagged for review. Pre-award reviews may also be conducted when the need is identified, either by the requisitioning department, the contracting authority, or ISC itself. Pre-awards reviews can also be conducted on a random basis. The verification documents that are needed in order to be registered in the IBD, for corporation, for example, we would need to see the corporate and control documents that are listed in the eligibility procurement on the set-aside webpage. This includes partnership agreement, joint ventures agreement, and documents of incorporation, Indigenous ownership documentation. Examples of that could be a copy of your Indian status card, a Métis citizenship card, modern treaty membership, or inclusion on the enrollment list of a designated lands claim organization. There are a couple of steps in order to be registered in the IBD. Step one, you just enter your company information. It'll ask you for the company name, the operating name, postal code, email address, and all of the contact information. And next you will receive a reference code. Second part of the basic profile, which takes about 5 minutes. This is the quickest and the easiest way to add your company to the IBD and increase your company's visibility. Provide basic information on your company, its products and services. Provide industry codes that define your company products and services within standard industrial and production classification system. So we're talking about NAICS codes or GSON codes here. There's also the advanced profile, which takes about 30 minutes. And this has the inclusion of additional information to make sure your profile is better attuned to the needs of your procurement professionals. With that, you can add information such as the size of your firm, the year it was established, quality certification, and your company's technological profile. You can also identify your current and planned export markets. You can identify interest in joint ventures if you're interested or not, your shared expertise, product licensing, joint marketing, technology transfer, and co-development. You can also provide examples of your successes, your unique capabilities, your major clients, and your experience on international projects. And of course, you can also add your company logo to your profile. And the last step, step 3, is the assessment. So I'm sorry? Okay. Once your information is completed and submitted, the information is reviewed and the business will be contacted to confirm registration, or if additional information is required. This can take some time, but it is important to work closely as you can with our IBD team to ensure that the documentation is up to date. So we'll talk a little bit about IPP, which is the Indigenous Participation Plan. And IPPs are important. It's an important element to advance Indigenous participation in federal contracting. They generate opportunities for Indigenous people and businesses to participate in current procurement and grow Indigenous businesses. They grow the capacity to complete for future procurements. IPPs can be applied to a wide variety of procurements. Several modern treaties contain provisions requiring the inclusion of socioeconomic evaluation criteria in the solicitation document. These plans may be referred to as Inuit benefit plans, Indigenous opportunities considerations, although regardless of the name, the intent is the same, and that is to increase the participation of Indigenous peoples and businesses in federal contracting. For procurements that do include IPPs, first, Canada will set the Indigenous Participation Plan evaluation criteria. Next, the bidders will make commitments related to these criteria in their IPP. And finally, these commitments will be scored as part of the bid evaluation. When the contract is awarded, the successful bidder is required to report back its progress in meeting those commitments alongside the usual contract work. In fact, all payments may be delayed until contractual IPPs reporting and monitoring obligations are met. Key feature of IPP is that Canada relies on competition between bidders to maximize Indigenous participation. Adding an IPP as a top evaluation criteria alongside prints and technical evaluations. So there are different forms of participation. The most common includes subcontracting. This is when evaluation points are awarded based on the bidder's commitment to subcontract to Indigenous businesses. There's also employment. This is when evaluation points are awarded for bidders' commitment to employing Indigenous persons through the contract delivery period. I mean, hours that the persons are employed or the number of position staff. There's training. This is when points are awarded for a bidder committing to train Indigenous peoples throughout the life of the contract. And there's indirect forms, as I mentioned before, when other forms of participation are not possible or to complete other forms Points can be awarded to bidders who offer indirect benefits, which can be grants, scholarships, or bursaries. So depending on the type of requirement, a department may choose to make an IPP mandatory as part of submission. Often IPPs are voluntary and submitted by the bidders, but given that they will normally include weighted or rated criteria, it is impractical to not to submit one. An important note is that bidders are required to provide proof with their bids to demonstrate that they will be able to deliver on their IPP commitments. This may include the names of the person to be employed or trained, the names of the businesses that will be subcontracted, and what aspects of the contract they will be delivering on, evidence that the appropriate engagement has occurred, and employment and training plans, including backup plans when commitments cannot be met as initially intended. So to structure their solicitation and company IPPs, contracting officers conduct market and capacity research with clients. It's important to reach out to contracting officers and departmental professionals throughout Indigenous procurement coordinators, through Indigenous procurement coordinators and PAC as regularly as possible, Procurement Assistance Canada. Investigate possible opportunities for employment, subcontracting, and training needs in any and all opportunities, so you fully understand the structure of the IPP, so you can determine where your business might fit in. Ask questions during the solicitation period as soon as possible, and provide insights on your community capacity and interest to participate in the federal procurement IPPs. Networking is also encouraged. Network with the potential bidders to make the capacity known, to be a subcontractor or a supplier, and attend bidders conferences as much as possible, and or site visits and other engagements to connect with potential partners. This will have an impact on the way IPPs are structured. The 5% target, we'll talk about what that is. What is the 5% target? The target is that at least 5% of the total value of all contracts awarded by federal government to be awarded to Indigenous businesses. This is a minimum target, not a maximum target. There is no maximum target. It is intended to stimulate a consistent and reliable demand from the Government of Canada for Indigenous businesses and provide contracting opportunities across a number of sectors. So what does this federal target mean for your business? An increased demand for contracts awarded to modern treaty beneficiary, contracts awarded on the PSIB or Indigenous inclusion contracting strategy when IBD or modern treaty business lists are a condition for award consideration. Use of Indigenous participation plan in the form of subcontracting carried out by businesses as part of a larger contract. Direct credit card purchases, known as acquisition card, can be used. A large percentage of purchasing is done through acquisition cards. So we do a large amount of small purchases through acquisition cards. So if you have a business, we encourage strongly to register and inquire about standing offers and supply arrangements also. And we also do services provided by elders, bands, and tribal council. Being on the IBD will increase your visibility in procurement plans and report. All federal, as I mentioned before, all federal departments are required to present to Parliament information on their planned annual percentage target for contracts with Indigenous businesses. The Government of Canada is working with Indigenous partners such as the National Indigenous Economic Development Board, Indigenous governments, and Indigenous businesses across Canada to design future plans for procurement rules and tools in procurement and business development. So to support economic reconciliation through procurement, Indigenous Services Canada will continue to work with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis to improve access to high-quality services, improve well-being in Indigenous communities across Canada, and support Indigenous peoples in assuming control of delivery of services. So efforts are currently underway to co-develop with Indigenous partners a new Indigenous procurement strategy, which will be based on Indigenous mythology and feedback, support greater Indigenous control and transform and/or transfer services. So engagements are taking place to gather information from the foundation of a co-development approach to the development of transformative Indigenous procurement strategy option. In these engagements, the transformative Indigenous procurement strategy team, which is TIPS for short, they're leading this work. They're also seeking to understand Indigenous perspective, how to align program changes to meet Indigenous needs and interests in federal government procurement, how to best implement the 5% target procurement with Indigenous businesses, and how to improve procurement data and more. So TIPS, we're looking for people to share with, work with, and validate possible new strategy for new options to transform the current PSIP program. So on their behalf, I invite you to email them if you're interested in chatting further, taking part in any upcoming engagement, or possibly getting involved in this very important work that we perform, that will form the future of selling goods, services, and construction to the federal government. Our engagement team will be at the Links to Learning next week. I believe it's in Vancouver. So if you have any interest in that, just send us a quick email, and which is, our contact information is right here. So if you're interested in giving your feedback or from your perspective, the TIPS email address is STAA-TIPS. If you have questions regarding the IBD, we have a separate email that goes directly to the operations team in the IBD, which is REA-IBD. And if you have questions regarding PSIB, there's a direct email address, and there's also a 1-800 number that you can utilize. And that brings us to the end of my presentation. I will stop sharing. Back to you, John.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anne-Marie. And there was a question that came in, and I can probably help with this answer, but I'll hand it over to you yourself first. But is there any consideration for companies to set up manufacturing in our communities, joint ventures, so we can be involved on a bigger scale as the community participants in the supply chain, and to create economic development and employment?
I'll defer to you, John. I think you have more experience with that.
Yeah, no problem. So this is a question from Kimberly, and the very quick answer is yes. But as with a lot of support on the way through, it comes from a number of different directions. So we Cando have been, and with Procurement Assistance Canada, have been working with a number of both companies and communities to try to look at these opportunities. And some of the key government departments that are involved in this from a federal perspective would be ISED, the Innovation, Science, and Economic Development, ESDC through the ISET network, the Indigenous Skills Education and Training, but it's a bit of a combined approach. So there is absolute consideration on this, and when we're looking at the Indigenous participation plans that Anne-Marie was talking about, this is a key component. And I put in the chat that Cando is actually working on a presentation or a seminar right now in partnership with our government colleagues to talk about Indigenous participation plans, because this question is exactly what Anne-Marie was talking about, where there's an opportunity for communities to organize their own direction, their own understanding of capacity, what they would like to do, their economic development vision, so that when they're approached by a government entity for one of these opportunities in contracting, or by a prime contractor looking for the opportunity to work more closely with those communities, the communities are actually ready and organized to prepare and be ready for that. And I know Tim Lowe had put in the chat that there's a number of other organizations as well, including CCAB and CAMC, that are also involved. So the big thing with that question is, just like with anything to do with economic development, which is really the focus of the EDO network, is to know that it's a combined approach. There's not going to be one entity that will likely assist, but it's going to be a team approach to look at that. And like I said, one of the big things Cando is focused on right now with our government partners is trying to figure out how to get that organization together so that when communities are approached for participation in procurement contracts, that there is a uniform strategic approach that supports the community and their desires, especially around things like manufacturing, business development, and how to create those local supply chains. So more to come on this question. It's a big question, but the short answer is yes, there is lots to be done in that space, and certainly reaching out to myself or Paul Macedo, as well as some of our government colleagues, we can actually help with some of that information as we develop. So there is another question here. I'll just take that. I'll take maybe those questions, and then we'll move on. But while I'm taking this question, our colleagues from Procurement Assistance Canada, if you would like to set up your presentation and organize how you'd like to move forward, then we'll be ready to go on that. So here we go. Hello, I have a crane company. This is a question from Aaron. I have a crane company that has been in business for 15 years. We are the only Indigenous crane company in Canada, which is really cool. Everyone needs cranes these days. We've had a very difficult time securing the type of contracts. There are crane companies that have partnered with bands who seem to get these opportunities and seem to be the most common relationship, but not what the partnership should look like. Can anyone comment or able to help us with this? So again, I think the combination of Anne-Marie's group, Daniel Sandos and Chris Duncan and myself, absolutely we could help with some of that. But from the government perspective, again, maybe a question to Anne-Marie is that I don't know if there's going to be a key differentiation between a joint partnership or an Indigenous community-based company, but there are competitive advantages and opportunities that can present themselves in that space. But Anne-Marie, maybe over to you. I think from the appearance of the question, I think one of the key pieces here is that on paper or in the processes, a joint venture may not look any different than a community-based or a fully Indigenous owned company in any of the PSIP processes. But in terms of when you're looking at Indigenous participation plans and you're looking at there may be elements there. I don't know if that's something you can comment on, but this may be a follow-up question, Aaron, as well, for us to talk a bit about more.
Yeah, definitely a follow-up question. There's a lot involved. There's a lot of layers there, but we can talk about it, Aaron. If you can send me an email or put your email in the chat, and I will get back to you with that with a more complete answer.
Great, thank you very much. And Daniel, I'll take one more before yourself and Chris from Bala from the Kamloops Indian.
John, please take another minute. I have some technical issues. I need to switch laptop again. Like it's the third time I'm switching.
No problem. You go ahead. We'll just take this question while we're waiting. I'm Bala from Kamloops Indian Band Development Corp. How is the business directory performing? Do you think most businesses are registered through the portal and are accessible? Have you thought of any, I believe it's any types of incentives to any temp incentives to register? So for the directory, Anne-Marie, I don't know if you have a feeling of how many businesses are registering. Are you seeing more businesses registering? Are there any observations about it? And how do you feel it may be better or likely to increase the number of businesses that are entering the Indigenous Business Directory?
Yeah, currently we have approximately 2,500 businesses registered in the IBD that are active. We get registration on a daily basis. I think on average, maybe 3 or 4 every day. And so, yeah, so in order, it's mandatory. You have to, if you want to be part of the PSIP program, if you want to be able to bid on bids that are limited to Indigenous businesses, you have to be registered on the IBD. There's no way around that. So we encourage every single Indigenous businesses that is 51% owned and controlled by an Indigenous person to be registered. You also get great visibility, networking opportunities, and it's not only available to the government of Canada, all of Canada. It's a public-facing platform. So anybody who's looking to do business with an Indigenous business, they will come to our directory.
Thank you, Emery. There is another